Wealth doesn't begin with money. It begins the moment you can no longer tolerate a life that feels small. It starts in the mind. With a quiet revolt against mediocrity, one day you look around and realize, this isn't enough, not for your vision, not for who you're becoming. And in that moment, something awakens. A seed is planted, not of greed, but of clarity, of hunger, of purpose. Napoleon Hill called it definiteness of purpose. The Stoics called it prohairesis, your inner authority. Either way, once that seed takes root, everything shifts. Your time, your thoughts, your circle. Even your inner voice starts to evolve. And you're no longer just living, you're becoming. In this video, I'll show you 12 clear signs that wealth isn't just a goal anymore. It's becoming part of your identity, quiet, steady, inevitable. If that fire is already burning inside you, hit the like button and subscribe for more. This isn't motivation, it's mental training for those ready to build real power.
Number 1.
Discomfort with mediocrity. There comes a point in every person's life where comfort begins to feel like a cage. What once seemed normal now feels suffocating. You wake up, go through the motions, smile when expected, and yet inside something feels deeply off. You're not depressed, you're not failing, but there's a gnawing sensation. This life doesn't fit me anymore. This is not a crisis, it's a sign that your inner world is evolving faster than your outer world. The routines you once accepted now feel meaningless. The people you once admired now seem uninspired. You start to see through things. Small talk, mindless scrolling, shallow goals. And instead of feeling proud of getting by, you begin to feel ashamed of playing small. That discomfort, that quiet agitation in your spirit, it's not a flaw, it's a signal. The seed of wealth has cracked open, and mediocrity no longer feels like home. The Stoics believed that discomfort is the first teacher. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." When you grow tired of mediocrity, you stop pretending that everything is fine. You stop numbing yourself with distractions. You stop defending a life that no longer excites you and that opens the door to something rare. A willingness to begin again, smarter, sharper, and more focused. But let's be clear, this awakening is not comfortable. In fact, it's lonely. People around you may not understand why you're changing. They may say you're being too serious, too distant, too intense. That's because they're still comfortable in the old rhythm. But you're not. You're no longer satisfied with the illusion of progress. You want truth, you want direction, you want results. This is exactly what happened to Howard Schultz, the man who turned Starbucks from a small coffee shop into a global empire. In his early career, Schultz had a good job, good pay, good benefits, but he felt empty. One trip to Milan changed everything. He saw what coffee could be, an experience, not just a product. The idea took root in him, and he couldn't go back to the comfort of his corporate role. He chose discomfort, and that choice built billions. The same story repeats again and again in different forms. A teacher leaves a stable job to write. A doctor walks away from a prestigious hospital to start her own clinic. An artist gives up comfort to create something real. In each case, the common thread is the same: discomfort with mediocrity. They were no longer willing to betray their potential just to preserve their routine. This is why discomfort is sacred. It's not there to punish you, it's there to prepare you. It breaks down what no longer serves you, so something greater can take its place. But you have to listen. You have to stop numbing yourself with entertainment, cheap pleasure, and fake ambition, and start listening to the voice that says, you were made for more. Stoicism teaches us not to fear pain, but to interpret it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. In other words, your discomfort with mediocrity is not a punishment. It's your soul pulling you toward a higher standard. This isn't about arrogance. It's not about being better than others. It's about being honest with yourself, about admitting in the quiet of your own mind that you've been living below your potential, and then having the courage to do something about it. So if mediocrity now feels unbearable to you, don't panic, don't numb it, respect it, because that discomfort is the doorway. And once you walk through it, life stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you shape with every deliberate step.
Number 2.
Intolerance for wasted time. You can always earn more money, but time, once it's gone, it's unrecoverable. And when this truth finally sinks in, not just intellectually but emotionally, you begin to move differently. You stop treating time like a background track to your life and start treating it like a limited asset that defines the quality of your existence. You feel it the moment you open an app and lose 45 minutes. You feel it after a shallow conversation that left you more drained than nourished. You feel it when someone pulls you into their chaos and you realize you let them. It's not just annoyance, it's a low-grade grief, because deep down, something in you is evolving. You're starting to recognize time as sacred. Seneca warned us, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." This was not just an abstract idea for him. It was lived truth, exiled, targeted, and burdened with politics. He had every reason to waste time in bitterness, but instead he became fierce in protecting his inner peace, and that meant fiercely protecting his hours. This is the mindset you begin to adopt. You're no longer okay with killing time. You want to use time, build with it, direct it, multiply it, and not just in terms of business or productivity, but in the deeper, quieter spaces of your life. The way you think, the way you create, the way you show up. This intolerance for wasted time shows up in your choices. You stop picking up the phone for chaos. You start saying no faster. You leave rooms earlier. You check your phone less because you're no longer addicted to stimulation. You're addicted to peace, and you realize that peace requires intention. Look at Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men alive, and yet his calendar is nearly empty. Why? Because he understands what most don't. If you don't guard your time, the world will take it from you without asking. He once said, "The difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything." That's not ego, that's clarity. The Stoics believed time was not just a tool, it was a moral issue. To waste your time was to waste your life. Epictetus urged his students not to postpone wisdom, warning, "How long will you delay before you demand the best of yourself?" That question cuts deep, especially when you realize that every delayed dream, every unstarted project, every distracted day isn't just a missed opportunity, it's a small betrayal of who you could have been. As you start respecting your time more, you notice something else. The world responds. People begin to respect your boundaries. Opportunities start to align. You attract conversations with depth instead of drama, and you begin replacing cheap dopamine with real discipline. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about being selective, because where your time goes, your life follows. This is why boredom now feels dangerous to you, why fake urgency from others triggers resistance. You're no longer available for things that keep you busy but stagnant, because you finally understand what you allow is what you become. And when you protect your time, you're not just protecting minutes, you're protecting your becoming. So if you're beginning to feel irritated by wasted days, shallow conversations, or empty habits, don't push that feeling away. Honor it, because it's not a mood, it's not burnout, it's evolution. It's your inner world aligning with the life you were always meant to build. Wealth doesn't begin with income. It begins with intention. and time guarded fiercely is the first and clearest sign that you're ready for more.
Number 3.
Mastery of attention. There is a moment in your evolution when you stop asking, "What should I do with my time?" and start asking, "What deserves my attention?" That question is the fork in the road between chaos and clarity, because time is external, but attention is the currency of your soul. Whatever captures it shapes you. You begin to notice this subtly. You can no longer tolerate being pulled in every direction. You feel scattered when your focus is divided. Even if you're technically busy, you realize that the difference between mediocrity and mastery isn't talent. It's attention, not just having it, but directing it. The Stoics saw attention as sacred, Marcus Aurelius warned himself. Do not allow your mind to be enslaved by distractions. He wasn't speaking about social media, but the principle is eternal. Whether it's gossip, news, opinions, or fear, your mind becomes what it consumes. And when your attention is hijacked, so is your growth. This is why the seed of wealth doesn't grow in a distracted mind. Because a distracted mind can't build, it can only react. Wealth, true wealth, requires concentration, not just for 5 minutes, but over weeks, months, years. And so you begin the shift from passive to active, from consumer to creator, from scattered to precise. Consider Cal Newport, author of Deep Work. He's not a Stoic, but his work embodies Stoic discipline. Newport argues that the ability to focus deeply without distraction is a superpower in the modern age. And he's right. The ability to lock in, to remove noise, to sustain energy on one hard thing. That's how wealth is built, not in chasing everything, but in choosing one thing and building it fully. You begin noticing how reactive your old self used to be, jumping from message to message, video to video, idea to idea. It felt productive, but it was chaos wearing a mask. Now you crave silence, not as escape, but as a tool. You mute notifications. You set hours for focus. You start your day not by reacting to others, but by returning to your own mind. Not because someone told you to, but because you felt the cost of distraction, and you're done paying it. Even Steve Jobs understood this. When asked about his best skill, he didn't say innovation or design. He said, focusing is about saying no. He once cut 70% of Apple's products just to pour full attention into the few that mattered. That's what creates greatness. Not more ideas, but sharper focus. The Stoic path demands the same. Epictetus reminded his students, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because protecting your attention often looks strange to others. You miss out on trends. You don't engage in drama. You stop explaining yourself. And in return, you gain something rare. Momentum. Deep, quiet, unshakable momentum. This is when you begin to experience a strange form of peace. Not the kind that comes from a vacation, but the kind that comes from alignment. You're no longer at war with yourself. Your goals, your habits, and your focus finally point in the same direction. And that unity creates gravity. People begin to feel it in you. You're not just productive, you're present. Mastery of attention is not about perfection. You will get distracted, you will slip. But what matters is the return, the speed with which you come back to your center, because that's where your power is. Not in controlling the world, but in reclaiming your awareness again and again and again. So if your tolerance for distraction is fading, if silence feels like home, if your focus is becoming your favorite weapon, don't question it. You're not losing touch. You're gaining it. You're no longer just alive. You're aware. And from that awareness, everything begins to grow.
Number 4.
Long-term thinking. At a certain point, your mindset matures. You stop asking, what can I get now? And begin asking, what's worth building over the next decade? This shift is quiet, but it is profound, because short-term thinking is driven by fear. Fear of missing out, of falling behind, of not being enough. But long-term thinking? It's rooted in strength, in vision, in self-respect. When you begin to think long-term, you stop worshiping urgency, you stop being pulled by trends and start being guided by principles. You no longer chase instant gratification. You invest in assets that take time. Your character, your discipline, your brand, your health, your skills, your relationships. All of them require delayed rewards. All of them build quiet power. The Stoics understood this at the deepest level. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You are not disturbed by events, but by your opinion about them, and this you can revoke at any moment." This is not just about emotion, it's about timeline. When you zoom out, you realize that most events, most setbacks, most frustrations are nothing but passing storms. They don't define your life unless you give them too much of your present, but long-term thinking allows you to remain still in the storm. You don't panic, you plan. Modern Stoic thinkers echo this. Naval Ravikant, a startup investor, writer, and modern-day philosopher, once said, "Impatience with actions, patience with results." That's the formula. You act with intensity today, but you wait with discipline tomorrow. You plant every day, but you don't dig up the soil looking for the sprout. You trust the process, not emotionally, but mathematically, because compound interest doesn't lie. This kind of thinking is rare in a world obsessed with now. But look at anyone who's built something that lasts, something that earned respect, not just money, and you'll see the same pattern. Quiet beginnings, long winters, years of obscurity, and then one day the roots become visible. Steve Martin, the iconic comedian, once gave the most stoic advice to aspiring performers. Be so good they can't ignore you. No hype, no rush, just relentless improvement until your name becomes impossible to overlook. This is long-term thinking in action, and it's how real wealth, financial, personal, emotional, is built. But this mindset doesn't come easy. At first, it feels like you're behind. While others post their wins, you're building foundations. While others monetize quickly, you're refining your process. But eventually you realize, fast is fragile, deep is durable, and when your focus is depth, your results become undeniable. The Stoics knew that lasting virtue was the true reward, Seneca wrote. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. When you think long-term, you stop craving everything. You start curating. You stop reacting to life and begin designing it. Every yes is strategic. Every no is protective. Even in business, the most powerful companies are built with time as a weapon. Jeff Bezos famously structured Amazon with a focus on the long game. He once said, "If we can keep our competitors focused on us while we stay focused on the customer, we'll win." That's not reaction, that's direction. And it was only possible because he was willing to sacrifice short-term optics for long-term dominance. So if your goals no longer revolve around the next paycheck, but the next decade, congratulations. You're thinking like an owner, not a follower. You're aligning your actions with a future that requires maturity, patience, and vision. And in a world of shortcuts, you've chosen the road of real power. Wealth rewards those who are willing to wait, but only if they are building while they wait.
Number 5.
A new relationship with money. There comes a time when your view of money begins to evolve. It's no longer about chasing it, it's about aligning with it. You stop treating money as a god to fear or worship and begin seeing it as a servant, one that reflects who you are, what you value, and how clearly you think. Most people stay stuck in survival mode. They view money as either salvation or sin. They fear not having enough, or they seek more as a form of identity. But this mindset always leads to tension. It creates people who either hoard in scarcity or spend in desperation. True wealth begins when this tension is replaced by clarity. When money becomes a mirror, not a master. The Stoics understood this clearly. Seneca, one of the richest men in Rome, and also one of the wisest, wrote, "Money has never made man rich, only philosophy has." That doesn't mean money is bad. It means that without wisdom, money multiplies your confusion. But when paired with virtue, money becomes a tool for freedom, an extension of inner order. This is the pivot point. You no longer ask, "How much can I earn?" You ask, "What value am I building?" That question changes everything. It moves you from a consumer mindset to a creator's mindset, from reacting to market demands to shaping your own economy, from fear to command. Consider the story of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. She didn't grow up around wealth. She started with an idea and $5,000 in savings. But she saw a problem, created a solution, and committed to the process. She didn't let money dictate her worth. Instead, she used money to build something worthy. Eventually, Forbes would name her the youngest self-made female billionaire. Not because she chased money, but because she served people. This new relationship with money also changes how you spend. You stop buying to feel better. You stop flashing wealth to prove something. Instead, you spend for alignment. You invest in knowledge, tools, leverage, and peace. Books become more valuable than designer labels. Time becomes more precious than gadgets. The question becomes, will this purchase multiply my clarity or drain it? Marcus Aurelius in Meditations wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself." That wasn't a rejection of money. It was a recalibration of its role. Because once you stop needing money to feel significant, you start using it with power. You're not owned by it. You're empowered through it. Eventually, this clarity shapes how you give. You stop giving from guilt or for appearances. You give from abundance. You give to build, to uplift, to circulate, not to signal. You begin to understand. Money, like water, flows best when it moves through aligned channels. It stagnates when hoarded. It disappears when abused. But when used with wisdom, it compounds. Not just financially, but spiritually. Your relationship with money also reveals your relationship with time. You stop trading hours for dollars. You start building assets, systems, skills, reputations that earn while you sleep. You become patient, not passive, strategic, not greedy. You understand that money earned from purpose stays longer than money grabbed from impulse. So if money no longer feels like a source of anxiety, but a system you can direct, if you now think about value before you think about price, if you give without drama and earn without ego, then you've crossed a threshold. You've become someone money listens to, not someone it plays with. And that's when wealth begins to grow. Not just in your account, but in your spirit. Number 6, obsession with growth. There is a turning point in your path to wealth where you stop craving comfort and start craving evolution. You begin to hunger, not for ease, but for expansion, for refinement, for self-mastery. You're no longer interested in being entertained. You want to be sharpened. That is the shift from consumption to construction, from stagnation to momentum, from comfort-seeking to growth-obsessed. Most people fear discomfort, so they avoid it. But you begin to seek it deliberately, not because pain is noble, but because growth requires resistance. The gym is not the only place where pressure builds strength. Your habits, thoughts, and standards need tension to rise. And when you feel that shift, when you replace passive living with active construction, something ancient awakens in you. Discipline. The Stoics revered discipline not as punishment, but as power. Epictetus, born a slave, and yet revered as a master of the mind, taught his students, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because true growth often looks strange at first. It disrupts your old identity. It breaks familiar patterns. It separates you from the crowd. But this discomfort isn't regression, it's rebirth. This is when your language begins to change. You stop blaming, you start building, you stop explaining, you start executing. Complaints feel like poison in your mouth, gossip bores you, drama feels like a tax you refuse to pay. Why? Because now you're operating from vision, not emotion. You've tasted momentum, and you'd rather protect it than trade it for attention. This is also when your inputs shift. You stop feeding your mind with noise. You turn down the volume of the world to hear the signal of your own becoming. Books, deep conversations, mentors, these become your fuel, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you finally respect the architecture of your own mind. You no longer need entertainment. You need insight. Consider the path of Kobe Bryant, revered not just for talent, but for his obsession with mastery. He was known for practicing before sunrise, studying film after games, showing up early and staying late. Not out of fear, but out of reverence for the craft, he once said, "Rest at the end, not in the middle." That's not about basketball. That's about life. Growth becomes sacred, and that obsession becomes your fuel. The Stoics would call this arete, excellence of character. Not excellence in comparison to others, but in full alignment with your nature. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That's the spirit of growth, not perfection, but progression, not performing, but becoming. And yes, this obsession with growth can feel isolating at times. People might say you've changed, that you're too focused, too serious. Let them talk. They don't understand that for you. Every day is a vote for the person you are becoming, and every small disciplined action is a brick in the foundation of your future. This is how momentum is built. Not in giant leaps, but in consistent, compounding effort. You start to feel a gravitational pull, a rhythm. Each day, you do something that your future self will thank you for. You show up, you improve, you get 1% sharper, and over time, that 1% compounds into something undeniable. So if you've stopped chasing comfort, if you now see discipline as a blessing, if you crave challenge because you understand it's shaping you, know this: you are no longer just living, you are constructing. You are no longer avoiding the fire. You are walking through it because you know what's waiting on the other side. And that's not just a sign of wealth, it's the foundation of it. Number 7, your language is changing. At a certain point, you begin to hear yourself differently. The way you speak, even inside your own mind, starts to shift. You catch the words you used to say, "I can't," "maybe," "hopefully," and they no longer sit right in your mouth. They feel small, uncertain, powerless. And that discomfort is not random, it's a signal. Your identity is evolving faster than your vocabulary. The language you use reflects what you believe about yourself. But more than that, it creates what you believe. The Stoics understood this with piercing clarity. Epictetus reminded his students, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." In other words, the internal dialogue must be disciplined before the external world can be shaped. When your relationship with power changes, so does your language. You begin to replace passive, anxious phrasing with direct, calm conviction. You don't say, "I hope it works out." You say, "I will figure it out." You don't say, "I'm trying." You say, "I'm committed." And this isn't about pretending, it's about programming, because language doesn't just describe your world, it builds it. This shift often begins privately. You start noticing the thoughts you entertain when no one's watching, the way you narrate failure, the way you explain setbacks to yourself. The moment you stop calling things bad luck and start calling them feedback, your growth accelerates. You're no longer a victim. You're an editor of your own reality. This is why your words matter more than you realize. They are not just expressions, they are permissions. When you say, "I always procrastinate," you're not describing behavior, you're renewing a contract with it. But when you say, "I'm learning to act faster," you're creating a new agreement, one rooted in identity, not excuses. Steve Jobs, known for his vision, once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." Why? Because belief shapes words and words shape action. The person who declares a future, even before they fully know how to build it, is already ahead of the one who waits for certainty before speaking. Your mouth becomes the architect of your momentum. In Stoic terms, this is about reclaiming authorship over your own mind, Marcus Aurelius wrote. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And what are thoughts if not unspoken language? Every sentence you speak, every phrase you repeat, is like a brushstroke on the canvas of your character. Eventually, this shift in language shows up everywhere. In how you speak to others, in how you respond under pressure, in the silence you maintain when gossip is tempting. You start using fewer words, but each one carries more weight. You move from trying to impress to speaking with precision. You start to mean what you say, and more importantly, you say what you mean. And yes, this will confuse people, especially those who knew the older version of you, the one who softened truths, hedged dreams, or made yourself small for comfort. They might say you're too direct now, too confident. Let them, because what they're witnessing is not arrogance, it's alignment. You're no longer speaking from doubt, you're speaking from direction. So if your language is shifting, if you're eliminating hesitation, rewriting your self-talk, and using words to build instead of hide, recognize this for what it is. It's not just a habit, it's a marker of transformation. You're not just learning how to speak more clearly, you're learning how to live more clearly. And that kind of clarity doesn't just attract success, it commands it. Number 8, your circle is changing. Growth quietly rearranges your life, and one of the clearest signs it's happening is this. The people around you begin to change, not always dramatically. Sometimes it's subtle. You text less, you linger less. You outgrow conversations that used to excite you, not because you're better, but because you're becoming different. Your values shift, your standards rise, and the rooms that once felt like home start to feel heavy. This is not rejection, it's alignment. The old circle matched the old mindset. But when the seed of wealth begins to take root, when your focus sharpens and your standards rise, you begin to crave proximity to people who hold you to that new standard. Comfort-driven communities start to drain you. Excellence becomes oxygen. The Stoics were very deliberate about influence. Epictetus warned his students, above all, keep a close watch on this, that you are never so tied to your former acquaintances and friends that you are pulled down to their level. This wasn't about arrogance. It was about responsibility. You protect your potential by guarding your environment. As you grow, you realize that energy is contagious, that conversations shape your internal world, that certain friendships, though familiar, keep you bound to patterns you're trying to break. And so, with quiet conviction, you begin stepping back, not to isolate, but to elevate. You don't need to cut people off with cruelty. You simply let your new direction do the sorting. This process can feel lonely at first. You might question yourself. You might miss the comfort of being understood without explanation. But over time, you begin to see that your life is not shrinking. It's refining. You don't need dozens of companions. You need a few aligned ones. people who challenge you to grow, not soothe you into staying the same. Consider Oprah Winfrey's journey. As she rose in influence, she became intentional about the company she kept. She once said, "Surround yourself only with people who are going to lift you higher." That wasn't motivational fluff. It was strategic survival. She knew that the weight of vision requires people who can carry part of it, not add to the burden. Your circle doesn't just reflect who you are, it influences who you become. When you're around people who normalize excellence, accountability, and clarity, your own standards rise without effort. You don't have to force yourself to evolve. You simply have to stay in the room. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his own leadership. Though an emperor, he chose to surround himself with philosophers and advisors who challenged his mind and sharpened his character. He didn't seek comfort, he sought clarity. He didn't surround himself with flatterers. He surrounded himself with thinkers. Why? Because even a king must protect his peace. Eventually, you begin to attract what you reflect. As your energy changes, new people enter your life, not through luck, but resonance. Mentors appear, collaborators show up, conversations feel deeper. The quality of your relationships upgrades without announcement. It just happens naturally when you start honoring your own standard. And yes, some people will take it personally. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're no fun anymore. Let them speak. Their discomfort is not your burden. You are not abandoning them. You're answering a call they can't yet hear. And that's okay, because your future requires different soil. So if you feel your circle shifting, if you've started craving silence over small talk, depth over distraction, truth over tolerance, don't resist it. It means you're becoming ready. Not for popularity, but for purpose. Not for applause, but for alignment. And not just for friends, but for allies. This is how wealth finds you. When your environment no longer competes with your evolution, but reflects it. Number 9. Adversity builds you. There comes a quiet shift in your mindset when pain stops surprising you. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And instead you begin to ask, "What is this shaping in me?" That is the mark of someone no longer afraid of life's storms, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they've learned how to use it. Adversity is no longer an interruption, it's instruction. It's pressure that reveals your structure. Most people avoid this. They distract, deflect, numb. But if you're evolving, you start to sit with it. You listen to the disappointment, you examine the delay. You no longer panic when life resists your plans. You pivot because you stopped expecting ease and started preparing for strength. The Stoics saw adversity not as a detour, but as the direct path to virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's not just a nice phrase, it's a principle, a strategy. When things go wrong, that's not a reason to stop. That's the reason to begin. And this is not just ancient wisdom. It's echoed by the lives of modern builders. Take Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, raised in public housing. He watched his father lose job after job without protection. Instead of growing bitter, he grew intentional. He built a company where even part-time employees could access healthcare. Because he refused to repeat the pain he'd seen, adversity didn't break him. It defined his mission. This is what happens when you let adversity shape you instead of shrink you. Your perspective expands. You start to see pain not as punishment, but as feedback. It's not life is against me. It's life is molding me. And that shift is everything. You stop running from the fire and you start forging something inside it. Seneca reminded us, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. Most people seek convenience, and they stay mentally soft. But you start to crave growth, even if it's uncomfortable. You look for the lesson inside the loss. You search for clarity in the chaos. You learn to take hits and still hold your center. This doesn't mean adversity becomes easy. It's never easy, but it becomes useful. That's the distinction. Pain still stings, but it doesn't paralyze. Disappointment still hurts, but it doesn't derail you. You bounce back faster, you reflect deeper, you rise more strategically than before. Even Oprah Winfrey, one of the most resilient figures in modern culture, once said, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." She didn't escape adversity. She excavated meaning from it: poverty, abuse, rejection. She faced it all and used it all, not for revenge, not for validation, but for elevation. That's the power of adversity properly processed. It turns pain into blueprint. Eventually, adversity becomes something more than just a teacher. It becomes a filter. You start to notice how people react to pressure, who blames, who breaks, who builds. You see yourself clearer too. The mask comes off in difficulty. The truth of your character, your discipline, your patience, your values, reveals itself in stress, not comfort. So if life is testing you right now, if you feel stretched, delayed, challenged, pause and breathe. Don't ask for it to go away. Ask what it's waking up in you. Because the truth is, you are being sculpted. Wealth doesn't only come to the skilled, it comes to the prepared. And preparation is not forged in ease, but in fire. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. And soon you'll look back and realize this wasn't a breakdown, it was a build. Number 10, your relationship with work has matured. In the early stages of ambition, work feels like a means to an end. You show up for the paycheck, the promotion, or the recognition. You dream of escaping it. Passive income, early retirement, buying your time back. But when you evolve, that relationship changes. Slowly, steadily, effort stops feeling like something to run from. It starts feeling like something sacred. You stop asking, how fast can I finish this? And start asking, how deeply can I show up for this? Because you begin to realize it's not just what the work produces that matters, it's what the work produces in you. The Stoics understood this better than most. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the Roman Empire, wrote in Meditations, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being." He wasn't chasing convenience or ease. He understood that fulfilling your role with integrity, whatever that role is one of the highest forms of living. Not because it's glamorous, but because it's grounding. As your mindset matures, you stop needing motivation. You start leaning on rhythm. The routine that once felt like a trap now becomes a path. Repetition no longer bores you. It refines you. You begin to see work not as a burden, but as a structure that reveals your values, your consistency, your clarity. Rick Rubin, the music producer behind some of the most influential records in history, doesn't approach his sessions with urgency or pressure. He creates space. He listens. He strips things down to their essence. He treats work not as noise, but as ritual. That's why his influence lasts, not because he works more, but because he works wiser. You begin to work the same way. You care less about looking busy and more about being effective. You slow down, not out of laziness, but because you're paying attention. You trade frantic energy for focus, and you begin to feel it in your body. You're no longer showing up to prove something. You're showing up because the act itself shapes you. Seneca wrote, "Work nourishes noble minds." And not just external work, internal work, the effort of staying calm when things go wrong, the practice of returning to your craft when the results aren't instant, the discipline of doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. These are not chores, they are anchors. Eventually, even your sense of time begins to shift. You no longer dread Mondays. You stop counting down to Friday. You don't see the week as a tunnel to get through. You see it as a field to cultivate. Your schedule becomes a mirror, a reflection of what matters to you. And that reflection gets sharper, cleaner, stronger with every week you choose to honor it. Mistakes no longer derail you. You respond instead of react. You analyze, adapt, adjust. You develop a quiet confidence, one that doesn't need external praise to stay on track. You don't need someone to hold you accountable. You hold yourself accountable, not because you fear failure, but because you respect your potential. And this is what separates those who rise from those who rush. The mature relationship with work isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention, but it builds something unshakable. Momentum, integrity, mastery. So, if you now view work not as a weight, but as a workshop, not as a grind, but as a gateway, know this: you've crossed a threshold. You've stopped chasing freedom from work. You've found freedom in it. And wealth? It's drawn to those who treat each hour not as an obligation, but as an opportunity to grow in private and deliver in full. Number 11, you regulate your emotions. There's a moment in your growth when you realize power isn't loud. It's not in the outburst, the insult, or the explosion. Real power is in the pause, in the breath you take between feeling something and acting on it. And that pause, the space between stimulus and response, is where wealth is built, where respect is earned, and where identity is shaped. This is the beginning of emotional regulation. You stop being owned by every surge of anger, envy, fear, or frustration. You begin to notice what's happening inside you without obeying it blindly. You don't suppress emotion, but you don't surrender to it either. Instead, you lead it. The Stoics placed this principle at the center of their philosophy. Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery doesn't begin with dominating others. It begins with choosing your own reaction. The moment you decide, "I will not let this situation dictate my inner world," you reclaim sovereignty. And that choice begins to shape your presence. You become less reactive in conversations. You stop snapping back when someone challenges you. You delay judgment. You observe yourself in real time. Anger rises, but you hold it. Anxiety tightens, but you breathe through it. Sadness weighs heavy, but you meet it with grace instead of panic. This is not emotional denial. It's emotional leadership. It's the same composure we saw in Barack Obama. Regardless of politics, his ability to remain calm under pressure earned him credibility across the board. During debates, interviews, and even moments of national grief, he was measured. He didn't rush to speak. He didn't let ego or emotion run his mouth. He gave himself space, and in that space, he created trust. You begin to understand the same principle. You realize that just because you feel something doesn't mean it deserves a reaction. You start to question the first wave of emotion instead of acting on it. You say things like, "Is this anger? Or is this really disappointment?" Or, "Am I offended? Or just insecure?" And when you name the emotion accurately, it loses its power to hijack you. This is what modern psychology calls emotional granularity, the skill of precisely identifying what you feel. And this one skill separates people who react chaotically from people who respond with clarity. The Stoics knew this before science did. Seneca wrote, "A great mind becomes a great fortune, and your mind cannot be great if it is easily shaken." Emotional regulation doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become clear. You still feel, but you decide. You don't argue when it's not worth it. You don't explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You learn the art of stillness, not as a performance, but as a default. And over time, this control becomes your edge. You don't lose deals because you got offended. You don't burn bridges because of a bad day. You don't say things you regret just to win an argument. Your reputation becomes more consistent, your decisions become less reactive, and people begin to associate you with steadiness. Eventually, this becomes your quiet strength. You're the person who doesn't crack, not because you don't feel, but because you've trained yourself to remain composed. While others are controlled by mood, you are led by mission. So if you've started to slow down before reacting, if you feel emotions rise but don't let them run the show, if you now pause, breathe, and choose instead of react, know this: you are no longer emotionally available to chaos. And wealth? It follows those who don't just speak with power, but sit in it silently until the right response appears. Number 12. Your self-talk has become stronger. The final sign that the seed of wealth has truly taken root is often the quietest. You've changed the way you speak to yourself, not just in public moments or polished affirmations, but in the raw, hidden, silent places of daily life. The voice in your head is no longer your enemy. It has become your coach. And that shift, internal, invisible, powerful, is what separates the stagnant from the self-made. Most people live under a dictatorship of doubt. Their inner voice is a critic. Every mistake becomes proof they're not good enough. Every delay becomes evidence that success isn't for them. They say things like, "I always mess this up. I'm not smart enough for that. I'll never get there." And they don't realize that they're hypnotizing themselves into failure, one sentence at a time. But when your self-talk evolves, so does your identity. You stop labeling yourself as broken or behind. You start speaking in terms of direction, not doom. When something goes wrong, you no longer say, "I failed." You say, "I'm learning." When you face a challenge, you don't whisper defeat, you speak strategy. That doesn't mean you're delusional. It means you've stopped making your inner world a battlefield. The Stoics were relentless about self-governance. Epictetus taught that we must not be carried away by appearances. That includes the appearance of our own thoughts. He believed the mind should be trained like the body, a place of strength, not indulgence. When you catch yourself spiraling into negative self-talk and choose to interrupt it, that is philosophy in motion. You begin to treat words like architecture. Every phrase is either building your future or breaking it, so you get intentional. You remove sloppy language like, "I can't," "I'm trying," "I hope." You replace them with phrases of authorship. "I am," "I will," "I'm creating." This isn't about pretending you have it all figured out. It's about speaking in alignment with where you're going, not where you've been. Consider the habits of someone like Serena Williams. Her self-talk wasn't an accident. She's spoken publicly about using inner language to stay grounded during pressure. She trained her mind to say, "You got this," not just once, but hundreds of times. Not because she always believed it immediately, but because she knew the voice you repeat becomes the identity you live. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius echoed this through repetition in his journals. "You have power over your mind," he reminded himself again and again. "Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't writing for us. He was writing to himself, to recalibrate, to return to reason, to master the narrative in his own head. You begin to do the same. When you make a mistake, you don't spiral into shame, you correct. When fear shows up, you don't silence it by force, you speak to it with clarity. "Yes, this is uncomfortable, and I can still move forward." Your internal voice becomes your greatest source of direction, not drama. Eventually, this voice becomes more than just supportive, it becomes selective. You stop feeding yourself weak language because you know it costs energy. You stop repeating stories that no longer serve you. You say less, but you say it with power. And when doubt does return, as it will, you meet it not with panic, but with presence. Not "now, I'm focused." So if your self-talk is now cleaner, clearer, and calmer. If you've learned to speak to yourself like someone worth leading, understand this. You are no longer in survival mode. You're in creation mode. You've moved from emotional noise to mental signal. And wealth? It follows those whose internal voice speaks not in desperation, but in direction. You didn't arrive here by accident. The shifts you felt, the discomfort with mediocrity, the clarity with time, the silence between thoughts, these aren't random. They are signals, indicators that the seed of wealth has already taken root within you. Not just financial wealth, but wealth of thought, of action, of identity. You're no longer chasing success. You're embodying the kind of person success is drawn to. Wealth isn't the goal. It's the reflection, the echo of a life lived in alignment, discipline, and sovereignty. So don't ask if you're on the right path. You're the path now. Keep going. Stay quiet. Stay sharp. Let your growth speak louder than your fear, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who move like they've already arrived. And you've stopped waiting for permission. You've become the one wealth was always looking for.